People who have been homeless, what was the first night without a home like, and how did you adapt to your new situation? One of the things I think about is homelessness and insulin. It's like effing $3.60 a vial in the US. That's like half of the rent where I am. I was homeless sporadically before the type 1 diabetes, but now I feel like I would just die, either from low blood sugar or high blood sugar. Both look like being drunk, and no one wants to deal with a drunk person. My child's godfather, a Vietnam vet, has this happen to his daughter. She was in a rough spot, didn't tell her parents, and literally died homeless, all because she was shrimping on insulin because she couldn't afford it. He was so utterly destroyed by this. He became an alcoholic for 7 years, was homeless himself when I met him, but he was in AA for 2 years at that point. I'm his daughter's age, and he literally saved me one night when my landlord attacked me in my car in front of the tiny house I was building. He was basically homeless too at this point, living under a pergola with a tarp while I built a tiny house. He had since used a VA loan to buy a house, visits my family and I a few times a year, and is like family. We finished the tiny house in spite of that awful landlord, sold them and own our own house now. I was homeless for a couple of months a year or two ago. I had a car and a low-paying job, so I lived in the woods in a tent for a bit. The first night was miserable. I ended up sleeping really uncomfortably in the passenger seat of my car, and it was a really cold night. After that, I got a tent and slept in on an old climbing pad I had. The first night was hell, but the next several weeks were actually not so bad. I had a spot in the woods where I was well hidden and would cook over a fire. I really didn't have it that bad, but it gave me quite a bit of sympathy for people who really do end up on the streets in a much more desperate situation. Shit, it's not easy. It was terrifying and cold and hungry. I didn't sleep a wink. I adapted over time, extremely steep learning curve to surviving homelessness. Nothing really prepares you for it. Slept in my vehicle, couch surfed with a friend, squatted in an unused trailer, all while still working at Walmart. Saved enough to get a crappy apartment and just kept going from there. I slept in a near empty garage block, put blankets over my front and rear seats like a tent, and had a duvet to keep me warm. Was absolutely fine until I woke up in the morning, had a wee behind my car, and noticed the white van next to me had an electric plug in it. Someone was sleeping in the van. Slept for a few more times, kindly, creepily, but kinda made me feel safer too. I slept in the school parking garage. The security guard effed with me once I'd asked him whether he would rather me go back to the park on the street in a nice part of LA, or sleep in there where I was at least safe. He never bugged me again. None of them did. I worked at a gas station with a pretty big parking lot over the summer, and when I'd work that night shift, I'd usually get one or two people ask if they could sleep in the car in the parking lot. I usually said, just park around the side at the back. I didn't understand why people were so thankful until today. The kicker is those people would almost always come in the morning to buy a coffee and a donut. Small coffee and a donut together only ran $2, but every morning we got fresh donuts that I'd put out, and in doing so I'd have 3 to 4 to throw away. I would always smuggle one out to a guy that was there almost every night. Until I started doing that, he would never buy anything, but after I decided I didn't care, and if I got fired, I'd start doing it. And he started buying coffee and donuts in the morning for him and his wife. I get that catering to the homeless can seem kind of icky to business, but it honestly cut down on waste. So why not? My manager eventually found out and decided to turn a blind eye when I explained everything to her. When you're a teenager, it seems kind of cool to sleep in the car, on the couch or floor of a friend or acquaintance, or for your mum, dad to come and rent an apartment for a month or two without paying for it. Moving around every few months carrying everything that you can in an old Honda Civic seems like an adventure. We once moved a couch across town in it. We must have looked like a couple of idiots. Once a few months of staying in a place where we had no furniture, were sleeping on the floor, the carpet of which was so flea infested that you could literally see the fleas hopping around. The landlord got so frustrated with us basically squatting in his property. My dad promised to pay and never did, that he removed the front door. So we went out to the same scam, some food from somewhere, and came back to find no front door, which is, retrospect, a pretty awesome way to get someone out of your property. One of the ways we scam food would be to go to breakfast buffet on a fancy motel, tell the server that we had a room there, eaten a ton of food, and just walked out. This was also kind of fun, but looking back, it's kind of effed up way for a dad to treat his teenage kid. Sleeping in my car wasn't that bad. It was summer, so it was pretty warm, which was my biggest issue. Showered in the gym and spent most of the day at the library before going to work. For the first few nights, it wasn't bad. However, one night police found me sleeping in my car and escorted me to the local homeless shelter, which was one of the most terrifying nights of my life. Since I'm lying there in a top bunk when a huge argument breaks out because one guy breaks out some meth, wouldn't share it with the second, then a third got pissed and started screaming at them to be quiet because he needed to sleep. Edit. Since this is coming up a lot, people keep asking how it was legal that the police escorted me to the shelter. I don't know the legitimacy of the issue. What I can say is that I was woken up by a knock on my window to see 4 cops, 2 cop cars. They were singing those super bright flashlights through my window at me, and I didn't even think of arguing with them. I was kicked out of my mother and 16 and spent 2 months homeless before the local authority placed me in a foster care. I think what hit me first was how my own mother could make one of her own children homeless. I felt like the least favourite of her children. It all came out of nowhere. I racked my brain for years after trying to think of what I might have done in particular. Also, the crippling loneliness you feel when you are trying to get hold of people to ask for a place to sleep for the night. I could not feel more alone in the world when someone would either not answer my message or tell me they were busy. I'm pretty sure I camped out in the park that night. Didn't sleep at all. Had the same thing happen to me after 2 weeks. I went into full survival mode, getting food and shelter where I could. It was the only summer I even got food aggressive when schools opened back up. It took me a week or 2 to realise these other students were not going to try and fight me for small square pizza at lunch. It really changes how you operate, at least in the short term. My mum used to lock me out of the house regularly for no reason, and I never had a place to sleep either. So I would walk 2 hours to the beach and just wait until sunrise when my mum went to work and would sneak through my window. Sometimes I would just spend a few hours night on the beach at a time. It's terrible, lonely, and really messes with your self-esteem, especially when you're young and you have nobody to take you in. I didn't really have friends. She prevented that. I've been led for sex tons of times by grown men when I was 14, 15, and was terrified for the first 2 times, but quickly learned that being meek gets you in a bad situation. So I would bring a knife with me and tell at them. I've learned a lot from those times, and I hate remembering the loneliness and the hopelessness. I felt like I could have died and nobody would have cared or even known who it was. This is a sad feeling, knowing that it's disappeared. Nobody would come looking for you or even care. Edit, you're selected, and whatever else word I butchered, sorry. I was on the train, it was typing super fast, and I didn't want people to look over my shoulder. LOL.